Hi, and welcome back to our next edition of the Check-In podcast, where we're talking about what it means like to lead well-being at work and at school. Today, my guest is Mr. David Arbuckle. David, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Nelson.
David, maybe tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is David Arbuckle. I am the executive director for a really long acronym, which is the Association of Municipal Managers, Clerks, and Treasurers of Ontario, or AMCTTO. We are a sector organization that provides education, professional development, and advocacy for people that work in local government, like in Burlington, Hamilton, the cities and towns throughout the province of Ontario. And as an organization, we are 16 strong, so not a huge organization, but small enough that we get to know each other and get to work together quite closely.
Awesome. And so, David, like just right out of the chute here, excuse me, what does well-being at work mean to you? What does it look like to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think my journey around well-being at work has taken quite a bit of a sort of a different tangent. When I started my career, I sort of worked in more political environments, working for politicians or within sort of a government relations background. And if anybody has worked in those environments, it is a 24/7 position. Your minister or member can call you at any point in time and look for a briefing or look for information on something. So it's always been that mindset of you're always on at any point in time in the day. You're always on, and I did that for about 10 years, and then when I moved into local government and then into the not-for-profit sector where I am now, I sort of carried that with me. And I think only recently I've sort of given myself permission to not be in that space 24/7 and always be thinking about work or always responding. So that's one thing I think for me, that well-being piece is, be on when you're on, but also be off when you're off. That's I think an important piece. But one of the other things for me around well-being, Nelson, is for me, my well-being is grounded in the other people in the office that I work with. I get a real sort of sense of satisfaction about being present in their careers and providing them with a platform for success. And again, I think for me, if I feel that my team is taken care of and ultimately being satisfied in the work they're doing, I actually derive a lot of satisfaction and well-being from that as a leader. So that's where I'd say my sort of journey has taken me, and also what that means to me personally in the environment I'm in now.
Okay. And can you share something that your organization does, maybe past or present, that you remember that supports well-being at work?
Yeah, I've got sort of maybe a smaller and bigger examples to provide for you. So one of the things when I joined AMCTTO, this was about 5 years ago, I took a look at our overall sort of benefits plan that we have at work, and I noticed that we talked a lot about being there for each other and supporting each other sort of in that space, but also realized our coverage didn't walk the walk that we were talking. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of times we would, I looked, and it would only be sort of licensed, psychologists that would be covered for their mental health. But we all know that assistance takes, mental health assistance takes a number of different forms, whether it's counselors or psychologists or a number of other different forms. So what I did was worked with my team about expanding that coverage and expanding the ability for people to use different methods for their own mental health coverage. And again, as an organization, small organization, it wasn't a huge financial impact for us, but at least it gave our staff some peace of mind that ultimately, if they were looking for some assistance with their own mental health, they would have the ability to maybe have some of the costs deferred for that. That's small or big depending on your own perspective, but the other bigger one that we talk about is, I think a lot is we have a compressed work week within the organization, and what that does, we have Fridays off during the summer, but that's because they've contributed to that compressed work week sort of throughout the year. So it is something I know that staff really appreciate, to be able to have some extra time with their families during during the summertime when a lot of people are sort of off. But the comments that I've heard from our staff in that space is that they really appreciate some of that flexibility and being able to have a little bit more work-life balance during throughout the year. So you put in a little bit more extra time during the year, but you get a good sort of June to September where it's a 4-day work week. So that I think has paid a lot of dividends for us and for our staff from a mental health perspective.
Oh wow, that's amazing. I'm going to go off script here and just ask you, like, do you notice a difference in, let's say, energy from June to September with a 4-day kind of work week?
Yeah, well, certainly, I've always been a big proponent of outcomes, not outputs, right? So it really is about making sure that everyone is clear in relation to the work that needs to be done, that we're operating, we're responding to our members. We are a member-based organization, so you want to make sure that you're always responsive. You want to make sure that you have coverage for the work that's being done in that space. But yeah, there definitely seems to be certainly a lot more, when you're in and you're present, you seem to be a little bit more in and present when you've had a little bit more time off to be able to recharge. So yeah, there definitely does seem to be a little bit more pep in people's step when they've had, they've worked a shorter work week. And there actually are a lot of organizations that are considering that option, as well as moving to those 4-day work weeks, even in the municipal sector and local government. Many of them are starting to think of, is that an opportunity to give our staff a little bit more rest? You're still working the same number of hours, but and delivering the same amount, but you're just doing it in a shorter time frame.
Yeah. And can you share one challenge you think today's leaders are faced with when it comes to supporting their team's well-being?
Yeah, I think on a related note to the compressed work week, one is remote work. Again, I think that is a challenge that certainly since COVID was prevalent. But that remote work week, I think, is a challenge that a lot of people face in making some decisions in relation to their overall staff. As I said, we work in we work with a lot of municipalities or local governments, and many of them have started, City of Ottawa, Toronto, even, in other levels of government, the province and federal government is calling their people back to work, 4 or 5 days a week. And we sort of took the approach as an association is to really look at, again, what are the outcomes we're looking for? What are the expectations of our members, and what is the type of work we're doing? And the fact of the matter is we can still work remotely and achieve our overall outcomes. So one of the things I did communicate to our staff, even though we work with a lot of municipalities, they're bringing people back 4 or 5 days a week. We wanted to make sure that our staff knew that we were supportive of them within their own sort of their remote work environments, and that we were supportive of them continuing in that aspect. But one of the things that in that same time frame is that when we do come together, we're purposeful in that coming together as a whole team, right? So 4 or 5 times a year, we'll actually come together as a full 16-person team. We'll do training, even some mental health training, some diversity training, overall sort of skill set development, but being very purposeful in when we do come together as a full team of making sure we're making the most of that time. So,
oh, awesome. So we talked about everybody else. How does David recharge the batteries? And what do you do for your mental health, David?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me anyway, exercise has always been very important. I need to exhaust myself a little bit from time to time, but also having a bit of variety in that exercise as well. So I'm a hiker. I really, I've always loved hiking and being outdoors for that sort of solitude piece. I loved it so much back sort of during the pandemic. I started a Bruce Trail hike and journey and actually over 3 years completed all 900 kilometers of the Bruce Trail.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, from Niagara to Tobermory. So that was really wonderful and an amazing sort of experience. I play baseball and basketball, and for me, that's for camaraderie. A lot of times, I love the sports, but it's great getting together with a bunch of people and just sharing that, having that sort of shared experience. And then the sort of the gym workouts and that sort of thing is good for the sense of sort of a goal achievement or targets, right? You're doing some personal bests, or you're sort of satisfied with some of the growth that you may have for your own sort of personal goals. So overall, it's exercise. It's that exercise for me. I can kind of get antsy if I don't, get out and into some fresh air or into some sort of engagement. So that's ultimately how I sort of look to recharge and give a little bit of check to my own mental health.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the hiking part of it, because in our men's support groups that we do, excuse me, one of the men, he's an avid hiker and he's got 2 dogs, and they are, I don't know what breed they are, they're Hungarian or something, but they're literally the fastest dogs in the woods.
Oh, okay.
It's just mad sprint, like it's amazing to watch live. Anyways, he said, "Hey, like, do you think we can do the support group like outdoors and maybe have a little campfire?" And I was like, "Sure, sounds like a great idea." So
Yeah.
yeah, we hiked in, camping chairs, set it up. He had it all already there, and it was amazing. Like, just changing the face of support groups and what it could look like, or the perceptions that men have maybe about it. And just when you said about sports, it's not the games that I remember, it's the banter in the locker room and
Absolutely.
on the bench that I miss the most. And when you bring guys together, I think we always generate that kind of banter naturally over time and so forth. So yeah, absolutely, hiking and moving and physical activities, more power to you. Dave, what advice would you give leaders that are facing challenges today?
I think for me, and again, I think I chatted a little bit about it, but I think people, when they have a job, they want to feel connected to an overall sort of larger purpose within that position, right? Because we're all doing sort of busy work within a certain space, but you're not necessarily connected to the why you're doing the work, or there's always the how and what you're doing, but not necessarily the why. So as a leader, I do think it's important to be as clear as possible in sort of defining what success looks like and how success can be achieved. Within sort of people's work life, they really do want to understand how they're contributing to the success of their organization. So I've made a very clear effort to, define goals at the beginning of the year, timelines, doing check-ins in relation to, where they're at with those pieces. And again, not for the purposes of checking in on them. It's for the purposes of, are you achieving what you feel you need to be achieving, and how can we help you achieve those things if you are struggling a bit? And then also, certainly recognizing people for those achievements, celebrating them. And and for us, it goes into sort of a year-end compensation as well. So drawing that line between what the work you're doing and the success of the organization overall, because I think purpose is so important within organizations, and I think for people's own sort of satisfaction is, I understand what I'm doing, I know why I'm doing that work, and I'm appreciated for the work that I'm doing. And I think that's so important that people have that reason to get out of bed and turn the computer on every day. So.
And when the day comes that you don't have to turn on a computer in the morning, that you get to retire if you so choose,
Yes.
how would you like the people that worked with you and for you to remember you by?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think I'm gonna use 2 words here. Maybe cheat a little bit, but go into but one's the root word of the other. So I feel like I'm not cheating too much. So the first one is passionate. Like, I want people to remember me as, sort of being passionate about the work, about sort of the objectives of the organization, but also passionate about them, and passionate about them, both both professionally and them as people. And then, the root, or the second word is compassionate. So, being present, being ready to respond in their time of need, be it sort of professionally through advice or guidance that I can provide as a leader, or even personally to, support them in a manner that, addresses their needs at the time of what they're experiencing in their lives. Because again, we spend a lot of time together, in your work life, sometimes, unfortunately, more than your spouse or your children, from a work perspective. So it is important that you do make those connections, and you do support your people in a way that is within the scope of what they're expecting. And I hope ultimately, when my day is done, from a work perspective, that ultimately that's how I'm described.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the world would be a different place overnight if we were passionate about compassion.
Right.
What kind of changes we would see overnight. And speaking of that, so David, what gives you hope for the future of well-being in workplaces moving forward?
Yeah, I was remarking to someone the other day, is I think leaders are starting to come around to the understanding, acceptance that you need to have that work-life balance, overall. And ultimately that's from a personal well-being, or the well-being of their staff, but also, for productivity and for retention of employees. So my general sense in talking to some of my colleagues with other organizations is that there seems to be a little bit more acceptance around that people need that space to disengage and to recharge. And that can't happen if people are sort of constantly on the edge of receiving direction or inquiries from colleagues or bosses. It just can't. So you need to allow people that space. And I report to a board of directors, and the president and the vice president. I know I've had a number of conversations with different presidents and vice presidents over the years, and I've always been very very encouraged by the fact that they recognize that need, they respect it, and that's what sort of makes me hopeful for sort of the future within at least the scopes of businesses that I engage with, is that there are leaders out there that are recognizing that need for people to disengage, and ultimately the impact that has on both their well-being as well as that of their staff.
Hmm. David, thank you so much. That was a fast, 15 minutes or so. I appreciate you participating and giving a different perspective from the industry that you are in. Definitely tough work and long hours. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and wishing you and your family all the best.
Great. Thank you, Nelson, for the opportunity. Appreciate it.